Welcome to the Guitar Breakdown, a review series of factory-made acoustic guitars designed to help make you a more informed consumer. Like most reviews, we'll of course discuss the guitar's features and tell you how it plays and sounds, but we don't stop there. We'll then take the guitar and run it through a series of tests designed to simulate some, shall we say, less than desirable situations to see how it holds up to just about any lifestyle. We'll then crack the guitar open to see if the manufacturers are putting as much care into the construction of the instrument as they are into trying to sell it to you. All of this is done by a master luthier who understands what goes into making a quality acoustic guitar. At the end of the video, we'll give the guitar a final breakdown score and see how it stacks up against the competition. You work hard for your money. Let us help you spend it wisely.
Alright, the first thing we need to talk about are the features on the Martin 000 X2 guitar. And this is their auditorium size guitar, so it's a nice middle of the range size instrument. Only has about a 4-inch deep body, not too big, just really nice and comfortable for somebody who may be just getting started or for somebody who's looking for a guitar that's just nice and easy to carry around. It does come with a Sitka spruce top, solid Sitka spruce, which is really nice and going to significantly add to the tonality of the instrument. The back and sides of this guitar, on the other hand, are what Martin calls the HPL laminate, which is basically high pressure laminates and aka plastic, essentially, with a sticker on the outside, or it's screen printed to make it look like it's actually made out of wood. You can say that's a bad thing, but in some cases it can actually be a positive thing, in my opinion. HPL is useful if you're looking for a guitar that's going to be incredibly durable, can withstand a lot of abuse. You could take this thing to the beach. It could be in the rain. It's not going to be as affected by temperature and humidity as much as well. So not always a bad thing, but it is going to lend the guitar to more of a plasticky sound and less rich woodiness. The soundboard is actually adorned nicely with a mother of pearl rosette, which has a nice look to it. And it also matches the mother of pearl fret markers that are on the guitar. Comes with a nice tortoise shell pick guard. And the fingerboard and bridge are Indian rosewood, so it's got some nice little features on it. Alright, the next thing we need to talk about on this guitar is the hardware. And like a lot of the manufacturers, it is branded with the Martin logo on it, so I'm not sure who actually manufactures them. It could be white labeled by another maker, or Martin might make them in-house, but they're very nice chrome. They match the strap buttons that comes on the guitar, and they have no slop in them whatsoever, which is obviously the biggest thing that I look for in a tuning machine on a guitar. They are maybe a little bit less, maybe more of a low ratio, like a 12-to-1 ratio as opposed to maybe like an 18-to-1 ratio. And they are just a slightly less smooth than I've seen on other guitars. But I mean, I'm not saying these are horrible by any means. They're just not quite as good as I've seen on other guitars. The guitar's bridge pins are just a nice basic plastic. Got black dots on them. Nothing special there. We see these on a lot of guitars. And the same thing with the nut and saddle on this guitar. They're just plastic. Nothing crazy there. I will say, especially on the saddle end, it's not the best. You can even see like the molding marks on it where it's not cut by hand or even sanded smooth or anything. So a little bit to be desired on that front. Alright, the next thing we need to talk about is the playability of the Martin 000 X2 guitar. And it has a 1 3/4 inch nut with a scale length of 24.9 inches, which is slightly smaller than we see on some Martins. So it is a nice fit for a lot of people, pretty standard width, slightly shorter scale length, so it can make it a little bit easier to play. I will say that I think that this neck is just a little bit chunkier than I personally like. I will say that that is a personal preference, not something that I can just definitively say whether you will like or not. The neck does have pretty prominent little flat spots here on the side of it that I'm not getting up here, and I think that it could have done a better job of getting it nicely rounded. The intonation on the guitar, I have no issues with that whatsoever. I checked it at the open position and at the 12th fret, and there were no issues whatsoever. The action on the guitar is a little bit higher than we have seen on other guitars, obviously something that can be adjusted after the fact if you'd like. But I will say, as we receive this guitar, it does need a slight setup job done to it. But yeah, I think that the playability on the guitar is good. The frets on it, no issues whatsoever. There's no buzzing or anything like that. So yeah, pretty decent marks on the playability. Definitely not as good as I have seen on higher end Martins. Alright, the next thing that we need to talk about is the all-important sound of the instrument, which is the most important thing that most people are looking for when purchasing a guitar. As always, we're going to be recording this with a Zoom H6 recorder, about 6 inches from the sound hole, using the XY microphone, and we're going to do no post-processing whatsoever, so you guys can get the most accurate representation of what the guitar sounds like. I do recommend using headphones or high-quality speakers so that you can hear what it sounds like. We will start off by just playing cowboy chords, starting with an E major, all the way through them back to E major again, letting them ring out so you can get a sense of what they sound like in that classic open position. First thing I notice playing the guitar is that I do think that the laminate back and sides, the high pressure laminate back and sides on this guitar really do color the sound, in my opinion, kind of in a negative way. It definitely has more of a plasticky tone as opposed to some of the other guitars that we've heard in this price range. So I will say that. So we'll just play a little bit of the songs that I kind of tend to play in all of these reviews so that you can get a sense of what it sounds like doing a few different things. Just some strumming on it for you with a nice flat pick. And then as far as sound up the neck, this particular guitar does need a little bit of a setup, so it's a little bit difficult to play up the neck like that. But yeah, my just general impressions of the guitar is it sounds pretty decent. But I think it's definitely lacking that classic Martin sound that we all look for on a guitar. Alright, the last thing we need to talk about in the daily category is the case that the guitar comes with. So, like most guitars in this price range, it does come with a nice soft shell case. A really good handle on it, very comfortable, big and chunky, which makes it nice and comfy. A good pocket on the outside, which is something you always want to look for. Plenty of room inside of there for anything like sheet music, strings, guitar strap, all of that stuff. And it has a single strap on it so that it can fit nicely over the shoulder. A lot of times I like to look for more of a backpack strap on it. And but yeah, you can put it on the left hand or the right hand side or the left hand side on this. And the inside of this case though does have very nice padding, as well as something I always try to look for in a soft shell case is the fact that it has this bolster and neck support. Because soft shell cases tend to not cradle the neck quite as well, something I always look for is that. So I think that this case is pretty decent. Not quite as high of a quality as fabric as we've seen in some other manufacturers, but all in all, a pretty decent case.
Moving on to the lifestyle category, we're going to start off with our scratch resistance test, and we do this to simulate just general wear and tear of things like belt buckles over the life of the guitar. What we do is take a wad of keys and belt buckles and rub them against the back of the guitar for 60 seconds, and then we will flip the guitar over and do the same thing to the front side. Up to this point, we haven't seen any issues with our guitars, but this is our first one where the top actually did receive visible scratches and dents. The back, on the other hand, received no marks whatsoever. Now we'll do our shore hardness test, which tests the hardness of the wood or plastic using the D scale. Because of the HPL, we did expect it to be hard, and it did measure at a 95 hardness for the back, a 91.5 for the sides, and a soft 46.5 for the top because of that Sitka spruce. Moving on to the dent resistance, we're going to drop a carbide steel ball onto the top of the guitar from a height of 18 inches. So this thing is actually pretty heavy. And it did leave a little bit of a dent in the top and didn't bounce at all. And here I am circling it. And to my surprise, though, when we did measure it, it was only 0.05 millimeters deep, which was really, really good. We'll do the same to the back. And as you can see, it just bounced because it is plastic. There's really almost nothing to dent there. Now we'll do our liquid resistance test. We do this to simulate different fluids that the guitar may come in contact with over the life of it, especially things like bug spray and salt water. Starting with bug spray, we'll apply that here. And some suntan lotion, in case you want to take it to the beach. Then fresh water, simulating rain. We'll use some salt water to simulate sweat or ocean water. Vodka, high alcohol content. And then finally some beer, which has lots of sugars as well as alcohol. And here's how it looked after 24 hours of drying. We'll then use naphtha to wipe it off to see if anything is wrong with the finish. And as you can see, nothing at all. Because this guitar really doesn't have finish at all. It is just, once again, a plastic. Now we'll perform our string tension resistance test. This is done so we can see how well the guitar holds up to different types of strings. And we first string the guitar up with D'Addario light gauge strings, which have 160 pounds of tension. And then with those strings on, we will actually adjust the neck so that it's perfectly flat by getting this dial to read 0. And as you can see, with those strings on at full pitch, we got a string height of 0.092 inches at the 12th fret. Now we're going to remove those and put these heavy gauge strings on, which actually have 212 pounds of tension, and see how much the guitar neck flexes as well as the top flexes with all of that extra tension. To our surprise, the neck was absolutely straight, wasn't affected by it at all, which is really a nice thing, but we did get a lot higher action at the 12th fret, which is probably because of belly being pulled up. Now we're going to do our stand failure resistance test. This is a pretty dramatic test designed to simulate the guitar falling and landing on concrete, possibly falling off of the stand. And we'll start with the back of the guitar. Oof. This is where that plastic back and sides really shine, and I don't expect there to be any cracks. And we'll move on to the top of the guitar. It's always painful to do this. But the guitar actually held up very, very well. And this is our first one that we've done where there was no visible signs of damage on the guitar anywhere on it, including on the headstock or the headstock to neck joint, and the nut had no damage whatsoever. So high marks for that. Moving on to the heritage category. We'll start off with the trim and joinery. And I don't have a whole lot to say here because this guitar does not have any trim on it whatsoever. No binding. All it has is this mother of pearl rosette. And that looks good, but you can't really give it high marks for something that it doesn't have. You can't give it low marks either. The finish quality on this guitar is tough to judge as well because the plastic back and sides have no finish on them whatsoever. The top does have a satin finish that is very thin, but looks good. The frets on this guitar are what you would expect from a Martin, even if it is one of their entry-level guitars, and I had no issues whatsoever, and no buzzing at all. Now we're going to move on to the interior build quality, and this is our opportunity to cut the guitar open so that we can do a lot more than we could with the camera. By doing this, we get to see the thickness and the composition of the sides, as well as the neck joint and the back bracing and everything so much better than we ever could with the camera. I know that some of you don't like it, but I think that it's a necessary evil so that we can see if these guitars are built really well for you. Alright, let's start off with the back, and you can see here that the fit and finish on it is super high quality, no glue squeeze out whatsoever. The label is on there perfectly straight, typically what you would expect from a Martin. They put this beautiful gray looking brushed finish on it on the black plastic. And one thing that was interesting is just to see how flexible those sides were. I will note that there is no laminations inside them, it is just a thin piece of plastic, so I don't know where the high pressure laminate name comes from. The interesting thing about the neck joint that we discovered was that it actually is a bolt-on, which I didn't expect for a Martin. That could just be ignorance on my end. So we removed this here to see what was behind it, and it was in fact a Phillips head. Interesting thing though was just by removing the screw, we still weren't able to get that neck to come off. As you can see here, the sides were quite brittle to cut open and caused a lot of chipping and actually damaged my saw. They were so tough, which was, you know, for an $80 saw, I wasn't expecting it to get chewed up like that. Moving on to the soundboard, which is where all that sound comes from. It is beautifully done. One cool thing here is you can see that the CF Martin logo is on the bridge plate, but it's actually put on in a mirror script so that when you shine a mirror in the guitar, it shows up correct, which I thought was just a beautiful little touch. Interesting neck joint here, how it all ties together with the transverse brace. You can see once again that plywood neck block and all the kerfing. Almost no squeeze out whatsoever, and the typical Martin fabric covered X joint. The braces do have a lot of meat left on them, and the guitar could sound a lot better in my opinion if you spent more time voicing it at the factory. One thing that we wanted to do was to remove that linen from the X joint so that you could see what it looks like, which is this, and it's pretty sloppy, and that contributes a lot to the tone as well. That should be a lot tighter, and it's what you see on a lot of Martins because they do pre-shape most of their braces on their guitars, and there's almost no way around that. Okay, let's see how the Martin 000 X2 did. Starting off with the daily category. This guitar doesn't have a whole lot of features, including no binding and things like that, so it only receives a 4 out of 10. As far as playability is concerned, it did leave a lot to be desired in my opinion, so it only receives a 5 out of 10. The sound of this guitar was not what you would expect from a Martin, and a lot of that is because of those HPL or plastic back and sides, so it only receives a 5 out of 10. The case, on the other hand, is actually a pretty high quality, including that beautiful bolster on the inside, so it gets a 7 out of 10. And the hardware on the guitar, pretty decent, but nothing to write home about, so it receives a 5 out of 10. For a total score of 26 points. Now the lifestyle category. Okay, as you saw, the scratch resistance on this guitar wasn't the best on the soundboard, and that's because of the very thin finish and that soft Sitka spruce, so it receives a 7 out of 10. The liquid resistance, the HPL back and sides basically made it bulletproof, so it receives a 10 out of 10. The fall resistance, this is our first guitar that had 0 damage whatsoever during the fall test, so it receives a 10 out of 10. The string resistance test did incredibly well as well, so I've never seen a guitar have no neck movement going from light gauge to heavy gauge strings, so it receives a 10 out of 10. And the dent resistance on this guitar was incredible, so it receives a 10 out of 10, for a total of 47 points. Now the heritage category. Starting with trim and joinery, it is kind of what we would expect with a Martin, with a little bit less attention paid to it because it is entry level, so it receives a 6 out of 10. The finish on the guitar, although there isn't much finish, that what is there is pretty decent, so it receives an 8 out of 10. The frets on the guitar are what we'd expect from a Martin, and it receives a 9 out of 10. The interior build quality on the guitar was really good, So we're going to go ahead and give it a 10 out of 10, which we don't always see. And as far as brand value, it is a Martin, and that's always a good thing. It isn't one of their high-end Martins, but if you needed to resell the guitar, you're going to probably get your money back out of it. So it's going to get an 8 out of 10 for a total of 41 points. So that brings our grand total for this guitar to a breakdown score of 114 points. Let's see how that stacks up against the competition. So far, the Taylor Academy 12 beat it out by 11 points at 125, but the Martin sits firmly right in the middle. There's a lot of guitars in this price range, and we think that the Martin 000 X2 kind of sits right in the middle of that low range, so I think there are better options out there if you're interested in getting a guitar that has better sound. If you're looking for a guitar that's pretty bulletproof as far as weather and moisture is concerned, we do recommend the Martin. So we hope you guys enjoyed this and that you'll like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.